Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Timothy McKnight.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our third week in Fit for Life. Apparently, Puxatawny Phil did not see a shadow this week, but I'm encouraged because it's 5:30 and I still see light outside. So spring is on the horizon. And so we can be excited about the warmer weather and warmer days to come. So hopefully you were able to watch the three videos that were posted on Sunday. I'm excited to share this information with you tonight, review a few things, and maybe add just a few more slides that might give you a little bit more insight into the topics that I presented on Sunday. So I figured we need to try to inspire you every week. I thought I'd try this. I'll give you a little inspirational thought or a video. I really love this picture here. You have two 80-year-old women, and the difference is the choices that they make for the most part. I mean, there's unforeseen accidents and some tragic health consequences, but a lot of times where we are with our health is primarily due to the choices that we make. So let that be an inspiration to you as you approach 80. Then I thought, in addition to an inspirational thought, that I would share something to make you laugh, something on the lighter side. So I've got a lot of these, and I'll just do one a week unless I decide to do them on the Sunday presentations as well. But this is a favorite that my brother sent me, and it still makes me chuckle. Hopefully this isn't you. I wanted to go jogging, but it looks like rain. So don't be discouraged by a little cloud up there in the sky. We can always do a little bit more, and you probably could walk or jog in the rain. It's not going to kill you. Okay, so this week, let's talk about quickly review some of the main topics that I was trying to highlight in the three videos that you saw on Sunday. The first idea here is that nature teaches us how to heal. Nature is perfect. Nature has been living harmoniously, living in a very healthy manner for its entire existence. And it's probably in the last 100 years, with everything man is doing to the environment, maybe we stressed Mother Nature out a little bit, but nature gives us clues on how to heal. So this is kind of a logical appeal to you to learn from nature. And I want to just remind you some of the lessons that nature teaches us. The first lesson is that the world, the universe, exists with these ideas of balance and harmony. And I gave you several examples of how the earth is always balanced. There's a period of growth and a period of recovery. And our body is also based on the same concepts. So every major organ in our body is balanced. There's a series of checks and balances, whether it's a nerve conduction with the movement of potassium and sodium, or hormones. There's always a hormone that balances the effect of another hormone. There's communication among cells. There's a complete balance in every system. And so the question for all of us is, how might our life not be balanced? And another way to look at it is, how are we maybe not living in harmony with principles that we know would help us to heal and live a fuller life? And then I ask you to reflect on this. Can you think of some common ways you might violate this message? If we're eating carrots every single day, well, that's not really a balance. Nature wants you to have a variety of vegetables. If you're always sleep deprived, you're violating this principle. If you exercise too much, I saw somebody in the office today who was feeling better physically, and he started walking, and he walked too much, and his foot started to really bother him, and he got discouraged and he quit walking. Well, that's imbalance. You can't push yourself too hard. You have to listen to the feedback your body's giving you. But when we do exercise, we need a recovery period. And the more intense the exercise, the longer the exercise, the more nature's telling us, take enough time to heal from that micro trauma so that you can continue to perform, train your body to do more. So the model that I've created for depicting balance and harmony really stems from being balanced in our behaviors, in our emotional states, in our relationships, and in our thoughts, or the quality of our mind and our thoughts. So there's an example here of a study that was looking at successful weight loss. And again, these are just the summary statements in this study. And almost every one of these statements that predicted successful weight loss had one of these concepts in them. And I'm not going to reread these to you because I presented them, but it was kind of exciting to me when I came across this. I immediately went back to that model of being balanced in our behaviors, our thoughts, our emotions, and in our relationships. And here we see it in a research study. The corollary is also interesting because the predictors of failure, 4 of these 6 predictors of failure, have to do with emotional states. And we talked about emotions last week and how it's emotions that drive behavior. Most of us know that we shouldn't drink a lot of soft drinks. We know we shouldn't eat too much sugar or too much salt. We know we shouldn't be carnivorous humans where all we're eating is flesh. But we do things not based on what we know. It's more based on how we feel. So it's critical that we become aware of that and that we get in some degree of self-discipline over our thoughts. But as we talked about last week, where do our emotions, but what drives our emotions? Why do we have these negative feelings, depression, anxiety, and anger? Well, it's because the stories we write. And the stories we write come from our belief systems, the beliefs that we have about ourselves, how we're wired in our brain, what we feel competent in, what we feel incompetent in. And those belief systems really dictate everything. So this week, we're trying to talk about how to rewire those belief systems. The second lesson from nature is order and sequence. And everything we look at in nature has an order and sequence. The growth and development of everything on the planet has an order and sequence, and it has to follow this order and sequence, or it won't survive and it won't thrive. And so I gave you some examples of humans at different levels, but this is a mandatory process for consistent outcomes. If we figure out what the order is and sequence for our healing, and we follow that, we're likely to be successful. So when I ask you this question, what's the order and sequence of your healing? You have to think about what's most important for me. So this gentleman that I saw today was in Fit for Life several years ago, and he lost about 50 pounds. He was doing great. And he was doing a lot of walking, and he was eating right. And then a couple of things hit. Gradually, the weight came back on, and some other events happened in his life. And he's gained most of the weight back, and now he's discouraged. And then there's COVID, and there's isolation, and there's anxiety, and all the emotions that we're all dealing with at some level. And so today, as we talked, he was asking, how do I get back on track? And I reminded him, this is mostly, it's not so much about exercise. You do want to move, but in his case, he overdid the movement. He walked too far and had the foot problems. So the order and sequence of his healing, I think, as he left today, was you have to eat fewer carbs. You've got to get about 50 to 75 grams of carbs a day, fill up your stomach with vegetables and nuts and seeds, and maybe some berries, and use that to sort of satisfy your hunger. But you've got to keep the carb intake down. And he's saying, I eat a lot of protein. I'm doing this right. And then he realized, you know what? So you said keep the carbs down. I wonder how much carbs is in the cranberry juice, because I drink about 3/4 of a quart a day. And I said, bingo, it's too much sugar, too many carbs. That's why you're not losing weight. So I think he'll do well now that he's understand that. That's the order and the sequence to his healing. That's the first step that he's got to take. So for each of you, you got to figure out what that's going to be for you. And then a great example of this lesson from nature is the law of the harvest. And we talked about this, that the law of the harvest is not shortcutted. It has to go through this sequence. We have to be patient during the planting season. We have to wait for the development and the nurturing and the growth of the plants before we harvest. And then the third principle that nature teaches us is independence and interdependence. So independence means that you do what you need to do kind of independently. But there's great power that comes when we're changing behavior, when we're interdependent with others, when we synergize with others, when we find a coach, a role model, someone who can inspire us. That's where we find that extra strength to move forward when it's difficult. And my patient today, I probably should have told him this. You need somebody that's in your life to be that role model, that someone who can encourage you and really get you motivated to do the things you need to do from a dietary standpoint and from a movement standpoint. And when this interdependence happens, there's a unique feeling that goes with it. It's a wonderful experience when you're part of a group that accomplishes something great, when you're firing on all cylinders, when it feels right, when you've accomplished something that you'd never expected to do because so many people were working together for the same common good. That's an experience that I hope each of us have multiple times in our life. And some of you have probably had that at some point. And I want you to go back and reflect on that. Why was that so powerful? Why did that impact me? And what were the elements that allowed that interdependence, that synergy with other people to be so effective in the outcomes that we achieved? So what does independence and interdependence have to do with healing, though? Well, I gave you this example of a woman. We're taking units out of this woman. We finally get down to the smallest unit in the universe, which is an atom. And then I mentioned when she stands on the scales and sees that she weighs 140 pounds, the scales are weighing the mass of every atom in her body. And that atom, the weight in that atom is in the nucleus, the center. But the rest of the atom is made up of this empty space. So the analogy would be, let's let a basketball represent an atom, and then you put a grain of rice in the basketball, and that grain of rice represents the nucleus. That's the mass. The rest of the basketball has no mass at all. But the space that creates that empty space of the basketball is made up of the movement of electrons. So we have a center core nucleus in every atom of our body, our carbon and hydrogen and chlorine and all those different elements, but we have electrons moving around creating a space. So from a different level of thinking, we are electrical beings, right? Because we have electrons moving. And if you ask an electrician, what do you call the flow of electrons? It's called current. Okay, so we are electrical beings. We know we're electrical. We know we can conduct electricity. We have a nervous system that takes advantage of that. We're conducting electricity in our heart every time the heart beats. Every time we move an arm, there's electrical conduction because of the things that happen in our nerves. So we're electrical beings. The right-hand thumb rule in physics says if you take your right hand and the thumb represents the flow of current, like in an electrical line. If you wrap your thumb or you wrap your fingers around that thumb, you create a field that is oriented in this plane. And that field that's created by the flow of electricity is called a magnetic field. And we take advantage of that when we do an MRI of your knee and we see pictures of your body. You also have a sense of a magnetic field just by the energy of other people. Really interesting today. I was seeing my massage therapist, and she was talking about, she's done this for 10 years. And she said, I can touch certain people. I can put my hand this close to their hand and I can feel their energy. She says, I don't know how I can do it, but I can feel it. And people who give off a lot of heat, if my hand is 6 inches away and I can feel their heat, they typically have a lot of negative energy. And that's been her observation. So really interesting, but some of us maybe have more of a gift to detecting and perceiving the energy of other people, whether it's a positive energy or negative energy. But it was an observation that she made. But that's magnetic energy, in my opinion. And you can have a positive magnetic field where you influence others for good and you draw people to you, or you can repel others because of a negative magnetic field with negative thinking, negative emotions. So we are electrical magnetic beings. And then if you ask a quantum physicist, what do you call the flow of electrons? They say the definition for that is light. So they would say, no, we're not electrical magnetic beings. We're beings of light. And to me, that's absolutely fascinating. So whether we're electrical, magnetic, or light energies, the question that I have is, how far does that energy radiate? I mean, if you think about it, it's almost an endless emission of energy, right? If you have a pond and you throw a rock in a pond, you're going to create a ripple effect, and those ripples will go out till you get to the shore of the pond. If there's other energies coming in against it, those two energies will converge and there'll be some dissipation of the energy. Just like people that bump into your life that are negative energy, if you meet on the same cycle as someone with that same energy, then there's greater ability to do good. That's synergy. So it's a really interesting concept. But if there is no boundary to the end of to the edge of the pond, how far would that ripple go before it died out? Well, it would go out a really long way. So the point is that our energies can be detected perhaps around the world in some sense. Bruce Lipton, who is a really famous author and has really done a lot of work in this area, said that in 2002, on September 11th, a year after the bombings of the World Trade Center, or I'm sorry, the planes hit the World Trade Center, the winning lottery number in the state of New York had the numbers 9/11 in it. Was that random, or was that maybe by some universal energy that everybody in the state was thinking of? And his point is, no, this is a universal energy. We're all thinking about those numbers, and it can impact the future in some way. So we are electric magnetic beings of light, and we can synergize with those healing energies by taking advantage of that and surrounding ourselves with people who are also electric and magnetic and full of light, full of love, very easy to approach, someone that we might want to try to emulate at some point. So we need to surround ourselves with these healing energies as much as we can. And of course, some of the energies, the people we live with, we can't really, we're not going to dismiss them or probably get rid of them, but we have to make sure that all the other energies overcome any negativity that they might bring into our lives. And this is, again, where a coach, a role model, or someone who inspires you can be very helpful as you try to change behavior and heal. And I love this quote by Jim Rohn. And, this is really, I think this is true. You think of the 5 people you spend most of your time with, and you're probably very sort of a mix of all 5 of those people because they have an influence on you. There's probably, the next 10 people you spend most of your time with, they probably don't have the same impact on you. But these 5 people you surround yourself with throughout their week probably have the greatest impact. That's probably through the electrical, magnetic, light influences of these people that we choose to let in our lives. So we are really the sum total of our environment. Not only our bodies and physiologies, but also our cells, our molecules, and even our atoms respond to these energies. And then I just showed you a study that supported this concept. So these are people who lost weight. And how did they do it? Well, it's this again. It's the top line here. I think this is red. These people not only lost the most weight after 6 months, but they continued to lose weight. And then when they gained it back, it was a slow gain, so that at a year and a half later, they were still at the same weight that they finished when they finished this dietary approach. So these people not only changed their eating habits, but they had contact with a therapist. They exercised, and they had a powerful social influence. So they had those energies in their life, and they had someone to talk to work through some of these challenges and some of these difficulties, that when you become a new person, what if my husband doesn't like me? What if I don't like me? What if I'm having difficulty changing behavior because I've had some significant trauma, significant hurt in my life, and I have to deal with that. I have to kind of vomit that up and then move on. So that is the key. So this particular study supports this law of independence and interdependence, and the importance of the energies of the people in our lives. So we talked also about the biology of belief, which was the 4th message. And this is a quote from our book on page 11, the workbook. that our belief systems are the sum total of our thoughts and emotions. And these are messages that we have accepted over time from others. We're letting other people write the stories of our lives. We're letting other people tell us what we're not good at, what we fail at, what we're inept at. We should let other people help us write the positive stories, and we should surround ourselves with those kind of people. But if we've had these negative stories that are self-destructive, then we have to change the wiring. And this is literally wiring in our brain. So we talked about how these belief systems originated last week, and that these are literally nerves that fire together. And once they fire together over and over again, they wire together, and they're stuck with those connections unless we break those connections. But this is where the self-talk and all the our self-esteem and our value system and all those things get etched into our behaviors and our mindset. And they can be reprogrammed with new nerve connections. And isn't that wonderful that we're not stuck being the way that we think we are, that we always have the capacity to change. And this is cognitive behavior therapy. This is how we change our behavior. So we talked about the conscious and the subconscious mind. I wanted to illustrate the importance and the difference between the two, because the conscious mind, when we're putting forth a lot of effort to learn a behavior or to do something, that's the nerves trying to wire together. They're not automatically there. We're trying to get those connections to connect, but they're struggling to make that connection, to make it automatic. Our subconscious mind, though, is able to, after we've made those connections, then there's no more thought. The execution of those plans happen automatically. And in some ways, we've all done that because we're all able to walk. Most of us are able to drive a car and have a conversation with somebody else with our subconscious mind. But when we're talking about changing behaviors that we're stuck with, overcoming a carb addiction, overcoming negative self-criticism about our weight, or anything else that subconsciously goes through our mind, those connections have to be rewired. And so the way we rewire this was illustrated by the signing your name. And hopefully you all did that. If you didn't, you got to do it right now. You got to get a piece of paper out and sign your name. And then you sign your name with your non-dominant hand and watch what happens. Watch how difficult it is to spell with your non-dominant hand, as if your hand is the one that's doing the spelling. It's not. But it's so difficult for those nerve connections to remember how to spell as you're doing it. And then remember how you felt when you did this with your non-dominant hand. It was difficult. It took you much longer. And most of you felt very uncomfortable. Like, get that pen out of that bad hand. This is awful. And there was a lot of self-judgment, like, I can't even read this. I don't want to ever do that again. But that's because you weren't wired to do that. With practice, you change the wiring, and now you can sign your name beautifully and acceptably to you with your non-dominant hand. So how do we change our behavior? How do we rewire our brain? Well, the answer is simple. It's practice, and it's not giving up. It's not being critical, especially at the beginning when things are difficult. Okay, now, I also ask you, how long until our energies manifest themselves? Because isn't that really the problem a lot of us have? We start changing our behaviors, and we get on the scales, and we're not seeing any changes. And then we start to become very critical of either ourselves or our approach, that there's some flaw in one of the two. So how long until those energies are manifest? Well, what does nature teach us? Nature teaches us that in the beginning, it's slow, and there's not much to see on the surface. But down below the surface, the roots are really reaching deep, and they're preparing for us to really sprout and grow, and to make these connections, and to be somebody, a stature that we never thought we could be. So even though it seems like it's a slow process, I want you to remember this. Remember, we talked about how quickly the gut changes in one day. We talked about how quickly the lining of the artery changes in one day based on the food that it sees. Think about how fast a broken leg heals or a cut heals. These things happen quickly. So even though we might not be seeing the the manifestation of the results we want on the scales as quick as we want to see them, your body is healing very fast. And you have to love that. You have to accept that. You have to believe that, and know that if you continue to present the right foods, the right thoughts, manage your emotions, have the right people in your life, that things will continue to heal. And soon those manifestations will be apparent to others and also to yourself. So we get stuck in the box, though, don't we? Because we try things and we don't see the results. And again, this is difficult. Some of you have been through many different weight loss programs, and you start on this one and you're getting the same results, so you make the same conclusions. And until we get outside of the box and start thinking a little bit differently and understand the importance of emotions and relationships and our thought patterns and our belief systems, we're going to be stuck in the same box thinking, if I just exercised a little bit more, if I was just perfect in my eating, which is it's a bad thing to say. If you just did this and this, you'd see the results on the scale. No, you have to get outside of the box. So we showed you the solution to this. And again, this is illustrating that you got to get outside your normal way of thinking if you want to make permanent changes in your life. Because most of us have tried to do these in the past, but we're stuck with a mindset. We're stuck with an emotional state. We're stuck with relationships that are harming to us, that make change difficult. So how do we measure our energy? Well, we talked about this. Your words are a reflection of your energy, the vocabulary that you speak. They're an extension of your thought. This shoe salesman, San Lund, who died of esophageal cancer, he died because he had other people telling him he was going to die. Then we talk about our emotional states. And in Proverbs, it talks about this. It tells us that as we think in our heart, which means as we feel with our emotions, that's how we're going to be. That's how we're going to behave based on how we feel. The heart is a symbol of our emotional state. And then our relationships, we really do become the company that we keep. And the gentleman that I showed you a few slides ago, that was his mantra. But one other area is our body chemistry. How do we measure the energy of our body chemistry? Well, we'll talk about this in week 5 when we talk about antioxidants and free radicals, because that'll help you understand what you're looking for in health food stores. But we measure your energy by this thing called oxidation reduction potential. If it measures negative millivolts, it's antioxidizing. It's energy giving. It's anti-aging. It helps you flourish and perform and heal. If it's an oxidative energy, meaning it measures positive with a millivolt probe that you put in that tissue, then it means you're getting older and your body's in a state of decay and decline. And we have some ways to measure that with some of the blood work that we'll talk about next week. But we can measure our body chemistry and get a feel for what type of energy state we're in. And if you get some raw vegetables and you blend them up in water and stick a probe in that slurry of raw vegetables, it will measure negative millivolts. It'll be antioxidizing. If you get a bag of potato chips or some cheese crackers and you do the same thing, you blend them up, it's going to be a negative energy because nature didn't create it. What nature creates for you has energy that helps you heal. They're antioxidants, and we'll talk about that in the next few weeks. So let's review what nature teaches us about healing in terms of obesity and adrenal fatigue. These are 2 topics that I wanted to mention. I thought I would use this backdrop to introduce you to these. Now, nature teaches us to heal either of these conditions. We have to follow the message that we just reviewed. So some of the reasons for weight gain. The main reason is poor nourishment. And there's a lot of words on here. I'm not going to read them, but they're there for you to review. Another reason for weight gain is poor repair. And these have to do with our thoughts and emotions and our relationships. And then a third area that has a relatively minor impact is low energy, lack of exercise, hormonal imbalances, micronutrient deficiencies, chronic fatigue, or sleep deprivation. So these are reasons for weight gain. on the weight loss hierarchy, if you want to lose weight, where should most of your energy go? Well, I told my patient today that the base of this pyramid, you have to nourish yourself with the right foods. You don't see anything on the bottom of this pyramid that says lots of carbohydrates. In fact, you're really not seeing carbohydrates here. Then you have to be able to repair. You have to repair your emotional states, your thoughts, your relationships, lower the inflammatory state of your body. You have to repair your gut. We've talked about that. You have to repair your adrenal glands. And then you want to enhance your hormones in your mitochondria. When we talk about increasing your metabolic rate and we talk about cardiovascular fitness, I'll explain to you very simply how you can increase your metabolic rate by increasing your mitochondria. So this is an example of balance and harmony, as well as order and sequence. So to lose weight, you have to be in compliance with these two messages from nature. Here's some weight loss do's and don'ts. Now, I'm not going to, well, it's a matter of balance and harmony too. So it's probably not good to weigh yourself daily because there's a lot of negative self-talk when you don't see changes. I'm going to just zip through these because you can read these. I don't really need to take time to read these off to you, but there are things that you shouldn't do and things that you should do that kind of run parallel with one another. Okay, so hopefully these kind of make sense to you. We did this exercise of chewing 20 times before you swallow versus eating really fast and not paying attention to what you're doing. Fasting at least once a month instead of cheating. Okay, let me go to the next list. So this is balance and harmony. Now, we're not going to be perfect. We're going to have days when maybe we're doing some of the don'ts, but the objective is to try to strike that balance and give our body what it's trying to tell us that it needs. Okay, so we should not be drinking juices or soda. My patient was drinking way too much cranberry juice. In his mind, he thought cranberries are a fruit. They're a good fruit, but the fruit juice itself was getting him in trouble because there's too much sugar in it. Okay, so we're going to talk about a lot of these concepts in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So I'm not going to take a lot of time to explain these here, but I just want to show you again, this is another example of balance and harmony. Okay, and then there's some weight loss myths. And I actually got a little confused myself when I was explaining this because my life during your presentation that you watched on Sunday was not balanced. In fact, I was up until midnight the night before I recorded that presentation. I came in 7 o'clock and I was exhausted. And if you watch that video, I was saying the wrong words. My energy was low. I was not living in compliance with the law of balance and harmony. I needed a good night's rest, and I needed maybe some exercise that morning to help me have the balance that I needed for that presentation. But calories in do not equal calories out. That was taught to me in graduate school nutrition. But there's something that is neglected in that formula that people misunderstand. And what I'm referring to here, for every one of you, for every one of your cells in your body, there are at least 3 microbes, 3 bacteria, 3 types of fungus, 3 types of virus that's in or on your body. And we don't account for the metabolic rate of those microbes. Most of the microbes are the bacteria in your gut, and they require energy, and they're using energy, but that's not energy you're using. So you cannot say that calories in equals calories out when the microbes are using some of the energy that you've eaten to do the work that they need to do. Another myth is that if you want to lose weight, you just exercise it off. That's the biggest loser approach, and that's not a successful approach. Now, they also cut their calories out, but and they also have a lot of therapy support to get them through some of the psychological challenges of that whole process. But if you're trying to lose weight by exercise, probably the only group that can do that are the very young, late teens, early 20s. Another myth is that diet pills help you lose weight. I've tried patients on diet pills. It can help them in the short term, but it takes away their appetite. But it's a false imitation, a bad imitation, because it doesn't really teach them the self-discipline that they need. And you can only prescribe these weight loss pills for 3 months every year, and then you can't prescribe them anymore. They're controlled substances, they're stimulants. They can increase your heart rate, they can increase your blood pressure, they can be dangerous for heart disease. So diet pills don't work. The diet pills you get at the health food store or the grocery store, they have caffeine in them. That raises your heart rate slightly. Yes, it might increase your metabolic rate by 100 calories, but that's not going to translate into anything that causes weight loss. Another myth is that surgery fixes weight issues. Now, I put a question mark in here because there are some people that maybe that would be an option after they've tried everything else, and maybe they're 100 to 150 pounds overweight. But what happens when you have surgery? You're changing the intestinal tract. You're violating the law of order and sequence. And many of these people that do this regret that they've done it. I took care of a woman when I was in my residency who had gastric bypass surgery, and she had one complication after another. And within 3 years, she was left not with 26 feet of intestine, but 4 feet of intestine. And with only 4 feet of intestine, she had significant nutritional deficiencies, and she was dying of starvation, and she was dead before the age of 48. You cannot violate what nature or God created for you, that intestinal tract, with the order and sequence of the digestive process. You don't lose fat cells. They get smaller. And then genes don't necessarily dictate your weight. We talked about this. This is the environment that you put yourself in. That's what triggers the weight. I showed you the identical twins. One obese, one is lean. It's the environment that obese twin was in that caused them to gain that excess weight. Some other truths about weight loss: that stress can cause you to gain weight. Sleep deprivation, high insulin. You do not want your insulin level high. If you come in my office, and I do this often in the office, if your insulin level is, let's say, 15 to start with, and I say, now go on a low carb diet, and I come back and your insulin level is 5, I can look at you and say, you did it, didn't you? You started to eat right because your insulin levels dropped. On the other hand, if you come back to the office and the number hasn't changed or it's higher, I don't even have to look at the scales. You've either gained weight or haven't lost any weight, because high insulin levels is what drives your weight to go up more than any other hormone. We also know that steroid and thyroid hormone imbalances can cause weight gain. Women, I mentioned this, when your estrogen level drops with menopause, your weight is going to go up unless you correct that. There's no way around that. It's going to be right around the belly. A lot of us have thyroid insufficiencies, meaning it's not quite optimal. We'll talk about that more in week 11. Gut dysbiosis, an unhealthy gut, unhealthy bacteria can cause weight gain. I showed you that slide and that study with the twin study, I think it was last week. Another truth is that anybody can lose weight. Don't ever say you can't lose weight. We're all capable of losing weight in a healthy manner. And there's absolute truth to the fact that our thoughts, emotions, and relationships contribute to our ability to lose weight. So this weight loss puzzle, I created this several years ago to show you there's many pieces to trying to lose weight. It's not just about food. So when we look at balance and harmony, the gut has to be balanced. The hormones have to be balanced. You can't have estrogen deficiency and lose weight. You have to have an order and a sequence to how you detoxify your organs and your fat. There has to be an order and a sequence to correcting the hormonal imbalances. The first hormone that has to be balanced is estrogen, and then probably thyroid, and then probably testosterone. When we're talking about interdependence, look at these energies in our life. We talked about positive energies will help us heal. We talked about, what if you're somebody that doesn't like to exercise? You don't even like to walk. Well, then you need to find a friend. Get your spouse, get somebody to do it with you. There is power in interdependence. There's power in synergy. And then the biology of belief. Holy cow, when you're talking about stress management, we've got to change our thoughts. We've got to believe in our body's ability to heal. We've got to change the energies that we're around. So here we have a great example of how nature is trying to tell us, if you want to lose weight, these are the energies that you need. These are the laws that you have to comply with to be successful. And if our only thought is, I'm going to starve myself, well, then you're clearly going to violate what nature has taught you and not be successful. So there are thoughts associated with weight loss and thoughts associated with weight gain. If we're trying to lose weight, we've got to have healing thoughts. This is the biology of belief. We have to have emotions that are healing, that help us heal. and that trigger different belief systems. So wouldn't it be wonderful if these were the emotional states that we found ourselves in all day long? That's the biology of belief. How about relationships? And this is probably a big stumbling block for a lot of us, because a lot of us probably feel, sometimes more than others, misunderstood, loved conditionally, inferior, not trusted. We might feel misjudged or manipulated. And what's the response when we feel that way? Well, I feel terrible. So Dairy Queen's got their hot fudge sundaes on sale tonight, and I'm going to go get one to feel better. So we have to heal these relationships. And this is the evidence of the biology of belief and independence and interdependence, finding people that we can synergize it with that can help our energies. And we talked about adrenal fatigue, kind of a complex slide here, but adrenal fatigue, let me go back to the beginning here. Here's the cholesterol molecule. Here is progesterone, women. This is what helps you maintain a pregnancy. I apologize, behind this box here is estrogen and testosterone. Here is the cortisol. Here's the stress hormone. This is what you need a lot of when you're in a stressful, life-threatening situation. And I gave you the example of trying to survive in a Navy SEAL unit for 2 months in a highly dangerous situation. What does the body do to help you? It makes cortisol. Cortisol reduces pain and swelling, increases your energy, and puts visceral fat around your belly, so you've got energy to use since your eating is not going to be guaranteed. That's the perfect way for your body to adapt for a short-term stress. We were not designed to be stressed every day, day after day after day. And when that stress happens for more than 6 weeks, our adrenal glands cannot keep making cortisol, which is right here. And so what does the body do? It becomes deficient in cortisol. And when that happens, we experience more pain, more swelling, less energy. And the classic sign of adrenal fatigue is tired in the morning and wired at night, can't go to sleep. Another interesting point here that I want to make is right on the bottom, right below cortisol, is cortisone. If you have arthritis in your knee, I'll give you a shot of cortisone. Takes your pain away, takes the swelling away, because it's so much like cortisol. Recently, my dad was given some prednisone, which is a steroid. It's very similar to cortisone. What do you think his energy levels were? Within a few days, he was at 94 and a half. He was a different guy. He was talking about, he was up cleaning the kitchen, taking the dishes out of the dishwasher. He was talking about maybe he was going to go back to teaching flying again. And I said, Mom, I'm sorry to tell you this. As soon as the steroids wear off, he's going to be back on the couch. But cortisol is a powerful hormone. We want to have the optimal levels, but we don't want to have too much cortisol or too much prednisone, because the long-term effects of that are awful. Okay, so here's the adrenal fatigue picture again. There's cortisol. There's this cortisol steal phenomenon that happens because if you need cortisol and you're not making enough in your adrenal glands, you will start stealing it from progesterone. You'll steal it from testosterone. You'll steal it from estrogen. And when those things happen, your body will tell you that there's a change. When you start making a lot of cortisol, it will cause insulin resistance. So even short-term stress can raise your insulin levels. And as I said, insulin puts on fat. You will gain weight if you're stressed and you don't manage it correctly. And it can cause more inflammation. So stress can be correlated or associated with heart disease. And when you're stressed, you're on this sympathetic overdrive. And this is your sympathetic nervous system is driving just on all cylinders. So your heart rate's up, your eyes are dilated, you're kind of in that flight or fight response. But again, nature teaches balance and harmony, and the harmonious side of that is the parasympathetic nervous system that is increased when we manage our stress, when we rest, when we meditate, when we take a hot bath, when we do something that we love to do that brings us joy. That's the balance that we're seeking. So this whole concept of managing adrenal fatigue is back to balance and harmony. There really are no good supplements for this. This is a matter of you just taking charge of your life, telling people, no, I can't do this. I need time for myself. Some of us have a hard time doing this, but we cannot violate this law and expect to feel well. This just shows you what happens to our hormones when we have adrenal fatigue. We'll talk about this in week 11, but you will have women, if you're having adrenal fatigue, your PMS is going to get worse because the progesterone you are making to help you deal with PMS is being used to make cortisol. Women, you will have hot flashes that might occur that you haven't had for 10 years because the small amount of estrogen that you had to manage those hot flashes is now being shuttled to make cortisol. The libido will drop because the testosterone is stolen. But the hormone the body prefers to use is DHEA because we don't miss that as much. And when I see hospitalized patients in their 80s and 90s and I say, did they have adrenal fatigue? All I do is measure their DHEA level, and it's extremely low. So what do they need? Well, they need lots of things, but they need healing and the rest and recovery just as much as the next person. Okay, so adrenal fatigue, how to heal it? Sleep, relax, and supplements. Balance and harmony, order and sequence. We talked about the healing power of gratitude. And the results was the more optimistic and positive, these people who express gratitude every day had more optimistic and positive feelings about their lives. And they were more physically active and had fewer doctor visits, so probably healthier. Again, this is the biology of belief. And if you're struggling with developing gratitude, the simplest remedy for this is service. Selfless service where you're trying to lift somebody else with no expectation of anything in return. This will put energy in your cells. This will put a spring in your step, a smile on your face. This will change your outlook, change your emotional state, help your relationships heal. It's very simple, but it's absolutely necessary if we're struggling. So how do we change our wiring in our brain? How do we change our belief systems that really sabotage us? Well, this is the summary slide. We have to be balanced. We have to remember that there's order and sequence in our healing, and we have to be patient in this process as we rewire our brain. We have to synergize with other people. We have to find those healing energies that can help us and motivate us. And then we have to remember that we literally create energy because we're electric, magnetic beings of light. And your thoughts and your emotions create an energy field that's literally magnetic. So last week, I asked you, on Sunday, for this week, I wanted you to not eat after 3 hours before bedtime. Try to go to bed hungry at night. If you do, maybe not hungry, but craving something, because most of us like to munch at night, even after dinner. But if you'll avoid doing that and go to bed feeling like, boy, I wish I had something to munch on right now. You wake up in the morning, you'll feel so much better. You'll probably even sleep better. And then I want you to start experimenting with vegetables. And I don't care how much you eat, but I ask you to eat 4 different colors of vegetables, even if it's 1 bite every day, and 2 different types of fruit, even if it's 1 bite every day. Get used to the foods that nature has provided you to help you heal and to energize your cells. Okay, so that's the summary of what we talked about. Next week, we're going to talk about nutrition and disease. We'll go over blood work. Then we're going to talk about chronic diseases that have a nutritional basis. And then we'll talk about the evolutionary changes of our diet. And I'll show you how our diet has changed and how that's led to all the diseases that we have, the cancer and the heart disease that's so prevalent, and why those changes, again, are violations of nature and have caused a consequence to our health. So I'm going to try to close this now. And I think I need to do the stop share so I can see your questions here. But let's see if I can remember how to do that. Okay, stop sharing. Okay. So is there any vegetable or fruit juice that you can drink that is good for you? So okay, so vegetable or fruit juice. Okay. Just I understand the question because sometimes it's good to have like a green smoothie and get your vegetables that way. If that's the only way you're going to get your vegetables or your fruits, then I would do it. But remember, nature's given you a set of teeth to chew and to help digest those foods. You'll probably get a little bit more nutritional value and probably have a little bit more control over your appetite if you go through the chewing motion. So it's not an absolute must. But again, if that's the only way to get those foods in as some type of a drink, I would just say be cautious with them, because you're kind of bypassing the intestinal tract, or at least the first part of the intestinal tract, because it's going right down in your stomach. So it's not a critical mistake, but be very, very careful with fruit juice. I would really try to limit it. And again, if you're following your carb intake, you're going to see that a 6-ounce glass of orange juice is a lot more carbs than you really should be eating or taking in a day. So I would really, if your goal is to lose weight, I would discourage you from drinking fruit juice. How do you get rid of craving for carbs? Oh, great question, Julie. What you do is you do intermittent fasting, and you extend that intermittent fast. So 18-hour fast, for 2 or 3 days, 4 days a week, until you feel like you're not starving doing that. And then you go do a 24-hour fast or a 36-hour fast. The reason you struggle with that is there's two hormones, one hormone in your brain called leptin, another one in your gut called ghrelin. And when you eat carbs, you rev up both of those hormones in your brain and your gut. And those hormones will tell you, you've got to have carbs. I got to have bread. I've got to have some chips. I've got to have something sweet. But the more you tell those molecules to be quiet, you're in charge, you're not going to eat those, eventually those carbohydrate cravings will go down. Just think it, if you were stranded in the woods and had no access to civilization, how long would you live? And you would live probably a couple of weeks without your carbs. Now the first couple of days you're going to be hungry, but probably by the second or third day that hunger is not going to be there until it really sets in a few days after that. So that's the best way of getting rid of carb cravings. Stop eating the carbs and do intermittent fasting, and you'll soon lose that craving. And then you'll realize that some people who do intermittent fasting go 2 or 3 days without eating, and they have to remind themselves, I'm not really that hungry, but yeah, it's been 2 days since I've had anything to eat. I probably should eat. So that would be the best thing to do. How often do I recommend you weigh yourself? I think it's probably the best advice is to do it once a week. If you do it every day, you're going to get really discouraged. And even when you weigh yourself once a week, depending on your hydration state, depending on where you are in your menstrual syndrome, depending on your stress level, depending on whether you just got off the treadmill and were sweating, there's going to be a lot of variation there. So you just can't be too judgmental on yourself if you don't see the number that you want. But once a week is probably, I wouldn't do it any more often than that. Yes, you can drink 3 hours before you go to bed. 6-pack, bottle of wine. No, I don't want you to do that. You can drink, but most of us don't want to drink too much because we don't want to be up all night going to the bathroom. So I think hydrating with water is a great idea. The prescription probiotic mentioned. Okay, so the prescription probiotic that we talked about. Oh boy, there's one that I like that's a non-prescription. It's called Floragen, and really what you're looking for with probiotics are refrigerated and encapsulated. Those are going to be the highest quality, not something that's been sitting out on the shelf that's in a tablet form, because these are bacteria that are supposed to be alive to go into your gut. And I'm blanking on the name of the prescription probiotic that my brother-in-law used to heal himself, or to at least temporarily heal himself for his ulcerative colitis. So if you'll put that as a Facebook question, I'm sure that will come back to me and I'll be able to answer that for you. 3 hours has been tough. Does quality matter? Meaning if we do break, what are the best options to not fall off the wagon? I'm not sure I understand that question. Is it 3 hours before bedtime is tough? Yeah, I guess I don't know what that means.
I think they're asking about fasting.
Okay, so fasting. So is the point there that fasting for 3 hours is hard? I'm not sure I understand the question.
I believe so. That's about when it was asked during the recap, was when you were talking about fasting.
Okay. Yeah, if you're someone who's used to a lot of carbs, 3 or 4 hours after you stop eating, you're going to be starving, and you're going to feel like you can't do it. You might even feel hypoglycemic. You might be shaky and not feel good. Um, Again, that will go away. Now, a lot of you are going to eat something. If you're diabetic, I definitely would not allow yourself to become symptomatic with hypoglycemia. So you should probably eat something. But for most of us, when we get hungry like that, we should just distract ourselves. Maybe chew some sugarless gum or drink some water. But if you keep feeding yourself when your brain's telling you want to eat, you're never going to shut off that hormone leptin, and it's always going to be in control of your hunger patterns. Yes, I don't see any reason why someone who's had gastric bypass could not fast for more than 12 hours. I would think it might even be easier for them because they're used to small meals. I know it's frequent small meals, but there's no reason why they couldn't do that. Yeah, great question. When you break your intermittent fast, the first thing I would do is hydrate yourself with 12 ounces of water. Just start with that. Make sure that, because your body's going to tell you want certain things, and make sure hydration is the first thing you do. And then the next thing I would do is I would probably try to fill myself up with roughage, with vegetables or some berries or um, those type of healthy foods first. But that's not going to be very satisfying. So I think it's okay to have a small amount of carbs, maybe a half of a baked potato, because you're probably going to crave something like that. But remember that fat is your friend. So a handful of nuts and seeds, maybe a half a baked potato with a couple pats of butter, or a bunch of olive oil. Don't be afraid of healthy fats in your diet, because that will help you feel satisfied. I usually eat my last meal at 4:30 and don't eat again until 10:30. Is this considered intermittent fasting? Yeah, that's intermittent fasting, because looks like that's if I do the math right, that's 18 hours. So yeah, it doesn't really matter when you do it. It's an 18 hours without food. But again, I just want to emphasize, when we talk about muscle growth and strength training, we talk about muscle confusion. When you're trying to get control of these hormones, insulin and leptin and ghrelin, that makes you want to eat, keep them off balance. Don't get so regimented that your body says, okay, I know here at 10:30 we're going to eat again, so I'm going to start secreting that leptin to make this person hungry. Throw it off balance. Once a week, maybe you go 24 hours or 36 hours with food, and then your body's going to respond much better, especially if you hit a plateau. Once you start doing the same thing, your body's going to figure it out, and your response is going to be less and less noticeable. So keep your body chemistry a little bit off track by mixing things up every now and then, and extending that intermittent fast. And the contrary is also true. If you're having one of those days where you're like, I just need to eat food, I'm not in the mood to do an intermittent fast today, then eat 3 meals. There's nothing wrong with that periodically. So again, it's just keeping the body in some of a state of, I'm not sure when I'm going to eat again, and the body will get will be better adapted to burn fat, and it'll learn to do it more efficiently. Okay, well, those are great questions. I thought this was a really fun presentation. We ended just right over an hour, so hopefully this benefited all of you. I look forward to next week's presentation. So have a great week and stay connected with us on Facebook. I'm going to try to be a little bit more active this week with a few things. Have a great week and stay warm and stay safe.